Good evening, and thank you so much for joining me in this video today. One of the things that you know that I'm very passionate about is the economic development of the African continent. And one of the main things that came to my attention, anyway, it doesn't even have to come to my attention. I think it's a sore point for everybody, is the issue of corruption. And I got very disturbed when I read an article by transparency.org that says that poor people are twice as likely to bribe and more likely to be victims of corrupt behavior. It continues to say that smaller companies and younger entrepreneurs are more likely to pay a bribe than more established institutions. So I felt that it's our responsibility as young companies, as young entrepreneurs, to examine ourselves and look at the role that we play in improving this continent, into making this continent a better place for future generations. So I made this small talk based on my experience, and I thought I will come up with a few points that if you're a young entrepreneur running a small company, startup company, or even planning to run a company, things that you need to look out for to be able to gauge and assess yourself. Because what I found when I spoke to a lot of young businesses, and I've been one of them, is that we usually don't know if we are participating in corruption or if we're enabling corruptions or even victims of corruptions. But I know from experience that I've sat with a lot of young people who have complained about the situation when looking for opportunities, sourcing opportunities, and actually implementing jobs. So I've made a few, like 13 or so points. Maybe we'll look at others, or we might not finish them today, or we might do more next time. I said, how would you know when you're a small business, or if you're just a normal business, if you are being involved in corruption? And the first thing that I like to look at is, is your business supplying where there is a demand? Have you sat down and looked at, is there a demand for my product? Do you have a skill? Do you have a product? Do you have a service? And is there a demand for this that you are supplying and meeting? Because what I find is that a lot of the times young businesses are not based on demand, but they're based on somebody who knows somebody in a department, who knows a manager, somewhere, who knows that there's a tender that is coming up. And because there's a tender that is coming up, then suddenly they are in that business. So if there's a gardening tender coming up, suddenly I'm into landscaping. If there's a laundry tender coming up, suddenly I'm into washing. If that is how you are running your business, then you are very much not an entrepreneur. You're more likely a tenderpreneur. And number two, what is the nature of your supply? So are you supplying a service or a business or a skill that is independent of politics or politicians, that is independent of individuals? So if you're selling bread, it doesn't matter who's the president. It doesn't matter whether it's Cyril Ramaphosa or Jacob Zuma or Didi Mabuza or whoever. If you are selling bread, people will need to eat. The stomach doesn't know who is the president. Is your business dependent on who is the manager of a particular company? If a manager of a company that you are supplying was to be fired or to get sick or to no longer be in the same company tomorrow, would your business survive? If 2 or 3 or 4 of the managers that you're supplying for were to leave the company, technical managers, supervisors, whatsoever, if your clients, if 3 of your key individuals, not companies, 3 individuals that you work with were to leave your company, were to leave their companies, would your company survive? If your company is dependent on the political climate, then you know that you don't have a service, but you are a tenderpreneur. Where do you conduct your business? So are you advertising your business on the internet, using outdoor advertising, using word of mouth like everybody else, and sourcing and attracting clients based on the credibility and the superiority of your service? Or are you conducting your business in the golf course, in the restaurant, in the dark corner somewhere? Are you hosting? Are you entertaining people? Are you getting your business based on your charm? Are you getting your business based on the gifts that you buy your clients? Are you buying people shoes? Are you buying people Christmas gifts? You know, it's one thing to say to a client, thank you so much. It's another thing to corrupt an official. And I think a lot of people, they are involved in corruption. Some are aware of it, some are not even aware of it. If you are one of those conducting businesses at Chisanyama, at the car wash, check yourselves. You are contributing to the problem of corruption in this country, in this continent. How do you price? Hey, do you have a standard price? If I go to your website now, will I know that X costs Y? If I ask for a brochure, will I know that this costs this? Do you have your pricing standardized, or does it depend on who's buying? When somebody wants to give you business, do you ask, what's your budget? You know, do you ask how much did the other guy quote? Because the moment you're involved in this, it means you don't have a pricing model. It means you don't have a product. You're not competitive. And that is why you have not put the effort of pricing your product or your service. If you're doing that, you are a Tenderpreneur. It's as simple as that, and you are participating in corruption, and you have no right to criticize politicians or anybody else until you yourself sort yourself out. And do you send cover quotes? Are you one of those people who say, who else has quoted? And do you collude with friends and say, you quote 50,000, I'll quote 45,000, and then next time I quote 35,000, you quote for 40,000, and we rotate the jobs? If you are doing that, that is tenderprenizing, and unfortunately, you still don't know anything about business. I always say that if you starting your business, try and go into a business where you'll count rands and cents, where you'll issue out receipts. If you're starting with invoices from the onset, something is already not right. Try and get into a business that will force you to think, that will force you to understand markets, and that is how you become a robust entrepreneur. Do you tender for something that you've never done before? Are you a middleman? So do you tender? There's a tender that says supply aircons, and then suddenly you are somebody who's going to supply aircons, even though you've never ever, dealt with a single aircon in your life. There's a requirement for a service, for cleaning service. You can't even clean your own house, but you are prepared to do a tender for cleaning services. You are a tenderpreneur. Are you a middleman? Do you do you exploit subcontractors because you have relationships, but they have the resources? Are you one of those people that will say, give me any job, and then you run and get a subcontractor, and then you pay them 10% of what their work is worth, and you keep the 90%, yet they are the ones doing most of the work? If you are conducting your business like that, you are a tenderpreneur. Do you open a company quickly for something that you've never done? Do you open a company for a particular tender? Do you get tips that there's a certain tender that's going to come up, and then suddenly you have a company that's going to compete for that tender? If you're doing that, you are corrupt. Stop it. Do you know somebody in the tender panel? Do you look after procurement people? Do you buy them lunch, buy them KFC, buy them ribs? You're corrupt. Do you subcontract and make more? I've spoken about that. And finally, and the most obvious one, do you pay a bribe? And I hope that a lot of us, it's very difficult. I know it's difficult to stay away from some of these things because unfortunately, sometimes you find that if you don't succumb to these things, you can't compete. You find officials that expect you to pay you to give you the job, and that expect you to pay them to give you the job, and even expect you to pay them to pay you. If you don't pay them, they won't process your invoice. And I hope our officials are also watching this, because the only reason I did this video is because I acknowledge as a citizen that it takes two to tango, and we can't keep pounding the officials without looking at ourselves. But I also hope that the officials are also going to be watching this and making sure that they look out for symptoms in their managers, in their officials, for corrupt behavior. Thank you very much, and good night. All the best with your African business.